So we already saw two ways of writing conditionals, the regular if-else statement and the switch statement. But there is another one, and that's the conditional operator. And this one is actually really nice. So let's check it out. So the conditional operator allows us to write something similar to an if-else statement, but all in one line. So let's again start by defining an age variable. And this time I'm setting it to 23. And now let's write age greater or equal 18. So this is here our test to check whether the age is at least 18. So basically if the person is of full age. And then after this condition, we use the question mark. And then here we write essentially our if block. So that's the code that we want to be executed in case that this condition here is true. So let's say console.log, I like to drink wine. Let's again add a nice emoji here. So basically if the person is of full age, they are allowed to drink wine, okay? And in this if block, so to say, we can only really have essentially one line of code. So only one thing can be done if this condition is true. Then we also need basically a mandatory else block. And that goes after this colon. And so let's just copy this code and say, I like to drink water. Okay. And that's actually it. So let's check the result and then analyze this a bit more. So in fact, what gets logged to the console is, I like to drink wine. And that's because the age is 23. And so this condition is true. Right? And this means that this code here is going to be executed and this one is not. So the second part here, which is essentially the else part. Now, if we were 15, then, of course, the second part is executed. Okay? So that's essentially writing an if-else statement all in one line. But instead of using a statement, we use this conditional operator. And the conditional operator is also called the ternary operator because it has three parts, unlike other operators. For example, the plus operator has only two parts. For example, 1 plus 2. But this one has three parts. So the condition, then the if part, and then the else part. Okay? Now, the conditional operator is, in fact, an operator, just as the name says. And remember that an operator always produces a value. So, in other words, an operator is an expression, right? So, what this means is that if we have a value, we can then assign that value to a variable. And so with this, we can make the ternary operator really useful to basically conditionally declare variables. So what we did here is not so much used, indeed. Instead, we do it more like this. So we would still test for this condition, let's say. So checking if the person is of full age. And if that's true, then all we want is essentially to return this. And if not, we only want this. Okay? And so again, this whole operator here is now an expression. And an expression produces a value. And so now we can go ahead and store that value into a variable. So let's call that drink. And then we can log this drink to the console. And let's comment out this part here and check. And indeed, we get wine as we declared up here. Great. So drink is now really defined conditionally based on this condition and all in one simple line. So without the conditional operator, we would have to use an if-else statement. And with that, this wouldn't be so easy. Remember, when we want to declare a variable inside of an if or an else block, we need to first declare that variable outside. So let's actually do that. So simply call it drink2. And then we would say if the age is at least 18, then drink2 is going to be wine. Let's just grab that here. Or else drink2 is going to be this water here. Okay, and again, we need to define the drink2 variable outside of the if and the else blocks, because any variable that we define inside of a block is not available outside. So we declare the variable here and then reassign it inside of the blocks. So just to make sure it worked, let's log this one here as well. But we really just did this for the sake of comparison. Okay, just so you can see the tremendous difference that the ternary operator introduces here in our code. So if you ask me, this one here is a lot easier to understand and a lot easier to write, right? So just changing this to something else here. And yeah, in both cases, we get a water back. So using the ternary operator, we were really able to transform this big block of code all into one small operation like this. And this is going to be useful in so many cases. And we will really take advantage of this throughout the rest of the entire course. And now we can take it even further. Because since the ternary operator is really an expression, we can now use it, for example, in a template literal. So unlike a normal if-else statement, like we tried and failed in the last lecture, remember? So that was here, where I tried to insert this if statement here, and of course it didn't work. But using the ternary operator, which produces a value, we can actually have conditionals inside of a template literal. So let's simply try that. And so I can now say, I like to drink, and then based on the age, I can say if I like to drink wine or water. So here in this placeholder, remember, I can put any expression that I want. And this here is an expression. Again, because it produces a value. So I grab it from here, paste it here, and that's it. The template literal will now use whatever result we get from this operator. So that's either going to be wine or water. And then it assembles that result into the final string. So let's check. And indeed, once more, the conditional operator works just fine. And with our age back to 23, then we got, I like to drink wine. Great. So I hope that this makes sense. I know that especially this part here can be a little bit confusing for beginners. So take a minute to really understand what happens here. And always keep in mind the concept of operator and of expression, which is something that produces a value. And thanks to that, we can then put that value here in this placeholder in the template literal. All right. Now to finish, I just wanted to mention that the ternary operator is not thought as a replacement of if-else statements. Okay, we still need if-else all the time. For example, when we have bigger blocks of code that we need to execute based on a condition. In that case, the ternary operator is not going to work. But the ternary operator is perfect when we just need to take a quick decision, for example, like this one. And that's especially true in places where JavaScript really expects an expression, just like here in this template literal. So here we could not use an if-else statement, and so the ternary operator really comes to our rescue here. So I think you can understand that this one is really, really important. So make sure that you absolutely understand how it works. And once you do understand, then let's move on to the final lecture of this section, which is yet another coding challenge for you to see if you did actually understand how the conditional or ternary operator works.